In this lecture, you'll learn how to basically reference a JavaScript file in the HTML file. So that would allow you to use JavaScript code from JavaScript file in the HTML file. And that is how you usually want to use that. And we will also with that take a look at some possible structuring for you. I won't be getting into folder structures, file structures, but just some general tips and tricks. So let's get started. And what we have here is basically three files. So we have JS file 1. Then we have JS file 2. So these are two JavaScript files. And then we have test.html. That is our HTML file. Starting with the first JavaScript file, we have JS file 1. And in it, we have a couple of functions. Okay, so we have test function 1 and test function 2. These basically set some text in the paragraph P1, as you can see in the code. And the interesting thing about this one is that we set inner HTML rather than inner text, because I wanted to do that little breakpoint to give a new line. But obviously you could play around with text as well, it doesn't matter. What we are looking for is a conflict. Okay, so say you have two JS files referenced. Now at this point, this test function and test function 2, test function 1 rather, and test function 2, these could be used. They could just be executed. You don't need to write any kind of a reference to a file in that HTML document. You do not need that, and we'll take a look at that. But let's say you have this file with the same method name, or rather function name, and then you have another file with a different name or with the same name. Okay, so you never really know. You never really know, so you do have to have some structure. And the way I would suggest you to do that is quite basic actually. If we get to the JS file 2, right here, you can see that we have the functions in a variable. In this case, for this example, we have test function 1, test function 2 in the JS file 1, and the same names for JS file 2. We have test function 1, test function 2. But what we do is we wrap in a variable. You see, the whole code in this file is wrapped in a variable, and then we have these key value pairs. Basically the same thing when we looked at the object. Okay, so this is a more perhaps advanced implementation of that. Basically we have test function 1, that is the key for this function. As you can actually see, it's called a property. Okay, so you can call it that, of course. But I would suggest to look at these things as key value pairs. I do believe it is easier to understand it all this way. And we have test function 1, and then we have function. Okay, so basically the name for that function is test function 1. Okay, and then we have test function 2, the same thing. But what happens with the variable thing is that we do have to declare it. Okay, so we have JS file 2, and then some function, some variable from it, wherever it may be, unlike JS file 1. So let's take a look at how it's executed. You see, in the test HTML, we have 4 buttons. We have, first of all, run function 1 from JS file 1. Okay, and you see that is test function 1. It's already in there, it's already in the scope, and therefore we can just take it and execute it. No additional reference required. But if you look at the two other buttons, we have run function 1 from JS file 2. You see, we have JS file 2 dot test function 1. So you see, we do need that reference at this point. from that different scope. It doesn't come from this scope, local scope, it comes from that JS file too. And whenever you do files, I would suggest do something like this. Of course, you can name them differently and avoid conflicts like that, but this is a lot easier, a whole lot easier. Okay, so other than that, the way you reference that JS file in the HTML is quite simple. You see we have some script tags on top, like that on top. We have JS file2.js, that is the src. src is source, and that would be the source for that file. So it might be some third-party URL, it might be some route from your website where you have it hosted, all these different arrangements, but you do need to realize that everything gets loaded from top to bottom. So if you do require an element to be loaded before the script, you want to put the script after those element tags. If you want to do something with an element once the script is loaded, once it is fully loaded, so say like in this example we have onClick, and therefore it will be executed from an element. Okay, so in those cases you want the script to load first, and this is the way to do it then. Again, you do have to be careful, those issues are difficult to work out, so just better create a structure right away rather than deal with it later. And with that, we will conclude this lecture.